They called him the coldest man in Lagos, a billionaire CEO feared by all, untouchable, unshaken. But one rainy night, everything changed. She was just a maid, ordinary, simple. Yet one glance from her eyes broke the walls he built for years. Power could not protect him. Wealth could not save him. Because for the first time, the cold CEO felt something he could not control. His heart. People in Lagos said Chief Droji was a man of ice. He was rich, powerful, and untouchable. He owned tall glass towers on Victoria Island and drove cars that ordinary people only saw in magazines. But he had no smile, no laughter, no softness in his heart. His workers feared him. They said he never spoke more than 10 words at once. But everything began to change the hot afternoon a young woman arrived at his mansion. Her name was Ifeoma, only 22, fresh from the village. She came with nothing but a small bag and the hope of finding work. When she stepped through the big iron gate, she did not know her life was about to touch the life of the cold billionaire. And when Chief Droji saw her for the first time, something strange happened inside him. He stopped breathing for a moment. His chest felt heavy. Why would a man of stone lose his breath because of a poor maid? Ifeoma did not understand why the tall man in the balcony stared at her for so long. She thought maybe she had broken some rule by walking too slowly through the gate. She quickly lowered her eyes, hugged her bag close, and followed Madame Beezy, the senior maid, who had come to welcome her. "Don't be afraid," Madame Beezy whispered as they walked into the large house. "The chief is a hard man, but he pays well. Just do your work and keep your head down." Ifeoma nodded, though her heart was beating fast. The mansion was unlike anything she had ever seen before. The marble floors shone like water. Big paintings hung on the walls. Even the air smelled different, like money. But as she followed Madame Beezy inside, she could feel eyes still watching her from above. Chief Droji remained on the balcony, his hand resting on the rail, his chest rising and falling. For years, women in high society tried to catch his heart, but none succeeded. Yet now, a simple maid had shaken something deep inside him. He did not smile. He only turned away quickly, hiding the strange warmth on his face. Cliffhanger. But why would a cold man like Chief hide his face from his own maid? The first night was not easy for Ifeoma. She was given a small room at the back of the mansion, near the kitchen. It had one bed, a wooden chair, and a small window with iron bars. She sat on the bed and thought of her younger brother, Uchenna, who was still in the village. She came to Lagos to work so she could pay his school fees. As she sat there, she heard footsteps outside her door. She froze. The steps were heavy, steady, and strong. The door did not open, but she could feel someone standing there. Slowly, the shadow moved away, and silence returned. She lay down, her heart still racing. She did not know it was Chief Droji himself, who had walked quietly to her door and stood there, unsure of why he even came. For the first time in many years, the cold man could not sleep because of another human being. What made the billionaire walk at night to the maid's door, and why could he not open it? The next morning, Ifeoma woke up early. She tied her braids into a bun, washed her face, and followed Madame Beezy into the big kitchen. She was given a blue maid uniform with a white apron. The cloth felt strange on her body because she had never worn anything like that before. She began sweeping, washing dishes, and arranging the dining table. While she worked, she heard a deep voice behind her. "Good morning." The sound almost made her drop the glass in her hand. When she turned, it was Chief Droji. He had never greeted any maid before, not even Madame Beezy. He stood there in a white agbada, tall and calm, his eyes softer than the stories people told about him. Ifeoma lowered her eyes and whispered, "Good morning, sir." He wanted to say more, but his throat felt dry. The cold billionaire, the same man who scared board members and government officials, could not find words in front of a maid. He turned quickly and left, his steps heavy. Ifeoma looked after him, confused. Why would such a powerful man speak to her in such a quiet way? If the chief himself was shy before his maid, what would happen the day his rich friends found out? Later that day, Chief Droji prepared to leave for his office. His driver, Tun, polished the black SUV outside the mansion. Ifeoma stood by the gate, carrying out small cleaning work. She bent down to pick leaves when the chief passed. For the first time, he stopped to watch her closely in the open daylight. Her hands moved quickly, her face shone with sweat, but there was a natural beauty that no makeup could buy. When she stood and met his eyes, he quickly looked away. Tun noticed this and raised his brow. In all the years of working for Chief, he had never seen him pause for any woman, not even the rich ones who came dressed like queens. "Sir, are we moving?" Tund asked, breaking the silence. Chief cleared his throat and stepped into the SUV. Ifioma, not understanding what just happened, simply went back to her work, though her heart felt a little strange. Why would a billionaire who ruled boardrooms become nervous before a maid sweeping leaves? That evening, the mansion prepared for a big dinner. Important business friends were coming to see Chief. Ifioma helped Madame Beezy in the kitchen, carrying trays and arranging plates. She wore the same maid uniform, her hair tied neatly back. When the guests arrived, they filled the living room with loud laughter and the smell of expensive perfume. Ifioma walked in quietly with a tray of drinks. The men barely looked at her, but Chief did. His eyes followed her every step. When she leaned to serve one of his friends, Chief's hand shook as he lifted his own glass. "Who is that girl?" one of the guests whispered, smirking. "She is just the new maid," another replied with a laugh. Chief heard them, but he said nothing. Instead, he cleared his throat and asked Ifioma to bring him water directly, though he had drinks in front of him already. The room fell silent for a moment. The cold chief had never spoken kindly to any maid before. What would his powerful friends think if they noticed the cold chief softening for a common maid? After the guests left, the mansion became quiet. Ifioma cleaned the glasses and plates, humming softly to herself. Chief walked in, his agbada flowing gently. For a moment, he just stood and listened to her voice. She turned and almost dropped the glass when she saw him watching. I'm sorry, sir," she stammered, thinking she had disturbed him with her song. But instead of scolding her, Chief asked, "What song is that?" His voice was low, almost shy. She blinked, unsure if she heard him well. "It is a song from my village," she replied softly. Chief nodded, his eyes still on her. Then, without warning, he stepped closer, almost as if he wanted to keep hearing her voice. But before he could speak again, Madame Beezy entered, carrying a tray. She looked from Chief to Ifioma, suspicion in her eyes. The chief cleared his throat and left quickly. Why would the strongest man in Lagos grow shy like a schoolboy in front of his maid? The following week, Chief Doroji tried to avoid Ifioma. He told himself it was foolish. He was a man of wealth, the owner of big companies, feared in every boardroom. How could he be unsettled by a maid? Yet every time he walked past her, his heart betrayed him. One morning, he found her outside washing clothes by hand. Her sleeves were rolled up, her skin glistening with water, her face calm as she worked. He stood hidden behind a pillar, watching her. Then Tund, his driver, came from behind. "Sir, you are late for your meeting," Tund said carefully, but his eyes followed the chief's gaze. Chief straightened immediately, embarrassed. Tund smiled faintly, but said nothing more. The cold billionaire had been caught as maid like a boy in love. If even his driver noticed, how long before the whole house discovered the secret? One evening, Ifioma returned from the market with Madame Beezy. They carried bags of food. At the gate, a slim young man rushed up and hugged Ifioma. It was her younger brother, Uchenna, who had come from the village without telling her. Chief, who was stepping out at the same time, froze at the sight. His chest tightened when he saw the young man touching her so freely. For a moment, his jealousy burned, but he kept a straight face. "Who is this?" he asked sharply. Ifioma quickly explained, "He is my brother, sir." Chief nodded, but inside he felt something strange. Why should he care who touched her? Why should the cold billionaire feel fire in his chest? What would happen if the world found out the strongest CEO in Lagos was jealous over his maid? That night, Chief Droji sat alone in his study. Papers lay on his desk, but he could not read them. He remembered the way Ifioma smiled at her brother. It was a soft smile, full of warmth, the kind he had never received in his life. He pressed his hands together and breathed deeply. "This is madness," he whispered. But even as he said it, he knew it was too late. The cold stone of Lagos had cracked. He was falling, and he could not stop it. He thought about calling Ifeoma into his office, but fear held him back. What if she rejected him? What if she ran away? For the first time, the man who never feared government ministers or business rivals was afraid of a maid's answer. What will happen today? He cannot hide his feelings any longer. The next morning, Ifeoma carried breakfast into the dining room. Chief Droji was already seated, wearing a simple white kaftan. She placed the tray carefully in front of him, her eyes lowered. He wanted to thank her, but his tongue felt heavy. Instead, he only nodded. As she turned to leave, he surprised himself by calling her name softly. Ifeoma. She froze and looked back. Their eyes met for the first time, not by accident, but directly. His chest tightened, his breath uneven. He opened his mouth to speak, but suddenly Madame Beezy entered with more food. The spell was broken. Chief quickly looked away, pretending to read the newspaper. Ifeoma bowed and walked out, confused by the way his voice sounded when he called her name. Why would a billionaire who commanded hundreds of workers suddenly grow shy to speak a single sentence to his maid? Days passed, and Chief grew restless. He avoided meetings earlier than usual, choosing to stay at home. When he heard Ifeoma's voice in the halls, his heart leaped. One afternoon, he found her outside, feeding birds with leftover rice. She laughed softly as the pigeons fluttered around her. Chief stopped a few steps away, his usual cold mask on. "You like birds?" he asked, almost shy. Ifeoma looked up, surprised. "Yes, sir," she said, smiling gently. That smile weakened him more than any rival in business ever could. He wanted to step closer, but his pride held him back. Suddenly, Tund appeared, ready to drive him to a meeting. Chief turned sharply, hiding the softness on his face. Tund's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. If even his driver now suspects, what would happen when the whole world sees the cold billionaire lose control of his heart? One evening, Chief's wealthy friends visited again. They laughed and bragged as usual, drinking imported wine. When Ifeoma entered to serve them, silence fell for a brief moment. One of the men leaned close to Chief and whispered, "You stare at that girl too much." Another chuckled. "Since when does the cold stone of Lagos notice a servant?" Their words cut deep, but Chief stayed silent. He forced his face into its usual mask of steel. Still, his hand trembled when Ifeoma placed a drink before him. She noticed her brows lifting slightly. Chief quickly grabbed the glass to hide his shaking. His friends exchanged curious looks, already sensing a secret. The cold billionaire, who never showed weakness before anyone, was now fighting his own heart. What will happen when powerful men who envy him discover that his heart belongs to a maid? After the visit, whispers began in the mansion. The guards, the cooks, even Madame Beezy noticed how often the chief's eyes followed Ifeoma. One afternoon, Madame Beezy pulled Ifeoma aside in the kitchen. "My child, be careful," she said, her voice low. "The chief is not a man you play with. He is rich, powerful, and dangerous if crossed." Ifeoma's heart raced. "But I have done nothing wrong," she whispered. Madame Beezy sighed. "Sometimes, doing nothing is still enough to make trouble." Outside the door, Tund stood listening, shaking his head. He respected the chief, but he had never seen him this way. Ifeoma tried to focus on her duties, but she could feel eyes always watching her, whether from the balcony, the dining room, or the long hallways. The mansion itself seemed to whisper that something forbidden was growing. If the whole house could already see it, how long before the city of Lagos itself discovered the secret? One weekend, Chief hosted a charity event at his mansion. Politicians, business leaders, and journalists filled the halls. Cameras flashed, capturing his every move. Ifeoma, dressed in her maid uniform, carried trays of drinks through the crowd. Chief stood at the center, cold and majestic in a black agbada. But his eyes betrayed him. He kept following Ifeoma across the room. At one point, she stumbled slightly, almost dropping her tray. Chief moved faster than anyone expected, rushing to hold her steady. Gasps filled the hall. The cold billionaire, who never touched anyone in public, had held a maid before all of Lagos society. Flashes from cameras exploded. Whispers spread like fire. Ifeoma's cheeks burned with shame as she stepped back. Chief cleared his throat, pretending nothing happened, but the damage was done. What will happen now that the secret was caught on camera for the whole city to see? The next morning, newspapers screamed with headlines. Cold billionaire chief Drogi caught protecting his maid. Reporters speculated. Gossip spread across Lagos, and even his business rivals laughed behind closed doors. Inside the mansion, silence weighed heavily. Ifeoma kept her eyes down, ashamed and afraid. She thought maybe she would be sent away. But instead, Chief called her into his study. She stood trembling as he rose from behind his desk. His face looked tired, his voice softer than she had ever heard. "Do you want to leave?" he asked. Tears filled her eyes, but she shook her head. "No, sir." For a long moment, their eyes held. Chief's cold mask cracked again. He wanted to speak his heart, but fear still chained his tongue. Before he could continue, the phone rang loudly. A powerful business partner demanded answers about the scandal. Chief clenched his jaw. His secret war between power and love had begun. Would he choose his empire, or the maid who had melted his ice? The scandal refused to die. Business meetings turned cold. Contracts that once came easily began to slip away. Chief Drogi's board members whispered behind his back, saying a man distracted by a maid could no longer lead. One night, he sat alone in his office, staring at the city lights from the tall glass window. His phone buzzed with another angry message from an investor. Yet, in the middle of all the chaos, his mind stayed on Ifeoma. She had done nothing wrong, yet she was now the center of his troubles. Downstairs, Ifeoma scrubbed the marble floors harder than ever, trying to keep herself invisible. But her heart was restless too. She could not understand why the cold man looked at her the way he did, or why his silence felt heavier than words. If power and money were already slipping from his hands, how much more would he risk for her? The board called an emergency meeting. Suited men and women filled the long, polished table. "Chief, we respect you," one director said, "but your name is now on every gossip page. Our partners are leaving. Something must change." Chief sat in silence, his jaw tight. For the first time, his power seemed to shake. Outside the meeting room, Tund waited, holding Chief's car keys, his face tense. He feared what might come next. Ifeoma, unaware of the heated debate, was in the garden trimming flowers, her blue uniform brushing softly in the wind. But even there, she could hear murmurs from passing staff. She knew her presence was tearing something big apart. In the meeting room, another board member leaned forward. "If you cannot control your house, Chief, maybe you should step down." The word struck like thunder. Would Chief defend his empire, or walk away from it all for the maid who never asked for his love? That night, Chief returned home late. His steps echoed through the silent mansion. In the living room, he found Ifeoma asleep on the sofa, her apron folded neatly beside her. She had waited with a tray of food that had now gone cold. For a long moment, he stood watching her. The cold billionaire, who once ruled with fear, now felt his chest tighten at the sight of a maid resting. Slowly, he sat across from her, his hands shaking slightly. He whispered words no one had ever heard from him before. "I don't want to lose you." Ifeoma stirred, opening her hazel-brown eyes, confused by his soft tone. She sat up quickly, trying to rise, but Chief gently stopped her with a hand on her arm. For the first time, his mask had fully broken. But could love survive when a whole city was waiting for him to fail? Word spread beyond the boardroom. It reached Chief's family. One Saturday morning, his elder sister, Aunt Mornike, stormed into the mansion. She was a proud woman in her 50s, dressed in rich lace and gold jewelry. She did not even sit down before speaking. "Drogi, what nonsense is this I'm hearing? A maid? After all our name has stood for." Chief stood tall, but his eyes showed strain. Ifeoma, carrying a tray of tea, froze at the doorway. Aunt Mornike turned sharply and spotted her. "Is that her?" she snapped, her face twisted with anger. Ifeoma lowered her eyes, her hands trembling. Chief stepped forward, blocking his sister's path. "Enough," he said firmly, but Aunt Mornike's voice only grew louder. "You will shame this family for a girl who sweeps floors." The room shook with her words. Cliffhanger, Would Chief stand his ground against his own blood, or would family pride tear his heart apart? The argument stretched into hours. Aunt Nike spoke of their late father's reputation, of family honor, of the society pages that mocked them. "Do you want to destroy everything we built?" she cried. Chief's face was tight, his fists clenched. Ifeoma slipped quietly into the kitchen, her chest heavy with guilt. She had never wanted to come between a man and his family. Madame Beezy found her there, sitting by the sink, eyes wet. "Child," she whispered, "love inside a rich man's house is never easy. But sometimes hearts don't choose where they fall." Meanwhile, in the living room, Aunt Nike delivered her final blow. "If you continue with her, Roji, you will no longer be my brother." Silence filled the air like smoke. Chief looked at his sister, the weight of years on his shoulders. Would he choose the blood that raised him or the heart that softened him? That night, the mansion was quiet, but Chief did not sleep. He paced the long hallway, memories of his sister's words burning in his mind. Family had always come first. His sister had raised him after their father's death. She was more than blood. She was the reason he became the man he was. Yet now, for the first time, he was ready to stand against her. When dawn came, he found Ifeoma sweeping the front steps. She looked tired, her eyes red from crying. He stopped and looked at her for a long time. Then, with a heavy voice, he said, "I may lose contracts. I may lose family. But Ifeoma, I will not lose you." She froze, the broom still in her hand, unable to speak. His words carried both promise and danger. But how long could their fragile love stand, when both family and fortune were turning against them? News spread fast. Newspapers, radio, and gossip blogs in Lagos carried the headline, "Billionaire CEO falls for Maid." The story was everywhere. Chief's business partners began to pull away. Some said they could not risk being tied to scandal. At home, Aunt Nike returned with two uncles, older men in Ibada, their voices stern. "Droji," one of them said, "you have worked too hard to let this girl destroy your name." Ifeoma stood by the doorway, feeling smaller than ever. Her hands shook, and her heart told her to run far away. That night, she packed her small bag and whispered to Madame Beezy, "Maybe it is better if I leave." Madame Beezy held her hand tight, tears in her eyes. "But child, will running make your heart forget him?" Would Ifeoma disappear before Chief even had the chance to fight for her? Before dawn, Ifeoma walked to the gate with her bag. The air was cold, and the street outside was empty. She reached for the iron handle, her eyes wet. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. "Don't go." Chief's voice broke through the silence. He was wearing only a simple white shirt, his hair uncombed, his face showing fear for the first time. "I can fight the world, Ifeoma," he said, his voice trembling. "But I cannot fight myself if I lose you." She looked at him, torn between love and fear. "Your family will never accept me," she whispered. He stepped closer, his hand shaking as it reached for hers. "Then let them leave. I will build a new family with you." The gatekeeper, hidden in the shadows, watched with wide eyes. But would the world let a man like Chief start over with a maid by his side? Weeks later, after endless battles, the noise died down. Many business partners left, but new ones came. The family, though bitter, could not break Chief's resolve. Slowly, they grew silent. Ifeoma stayed, no longer just a maid, but the woman who softened the cold heart of a billionaire. One evening, the mansion was full of laughter, not from high-class guests, but from the staff who now ate freely at the long dining table. Chief sat at the head, Ifeoma by his side, her face glowing in a simple white gown, her braids loose over her shoulders. He looked at her and smiled, a smile the world thought impossible. The man who once ruled with fear had chosen love over pride. His life was no longer lonely, his home no longer cold. Final lesson: power and money can win respect, but only love can win peace. And so, the cold billionaire who once ruled with silence and fear found warmth in the most unexpected place, the heart of a simple maid. His story reminds us that no matter how high we rise, love remains the greatest treasure. Now I ask you, my people, what do you think? Should Chief Doroji have risked everything for Ifioma, or should he have listened to his family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, hit the like button and subscribe for more African love tales told around the fire. And don't stop here. Click on the next story waiting for you, because the journey of love never ends.